Here's a similar argument, the argument from open-mindedness and humility. So a lot of people today would say, not only is tolerance a virtue, but one of the clear vices that most people agree about is that you shouldn't be dogmatic. You shouldn't be narrow-minded. You shouldn't think you're right and everyone else is wrong. And a view that implied that you could think that must be a mistaken view. If your moral point of view suggests that you can rightfully think or rightly think that you're correct about some moral issue while others are wrong, then you must have the wrong moral point of view. Premise 1, if there are objective moral standards, then dogmatism is acceptable. So this argument is sort of an indirect argument for cultural relativism by arguing against moral objectivism. Premise 2, clearly dogmatism is unacceptable. Conclusion, thus there are no objective moral standards. In other words, moral objectivism is false. There are no universal moral truths that apply to all people at all times. So why would you think that somehow objectivism is connected to dogmatism, while relativism, moral relativism, either of the subjectivist variety, of the cultural relativist variety, is connected to being open-minded and listening to others and showing that kind of virtuous disposition toward others? For the relativists, morality is a lot like ice cream. It's a lot like our taste in ice cream. There isn't a correct taste when it comes to ice cream. It's not that some people are right for liking Rocky Road and other people are wrong for liking chocolate mint. There are just different tastes, different preferences. And if that's the case, it doesn't make sense to say, well, I'm right in what I like in ice cream and everyone else is wrong. You just say, no, we just have different tastes, different preferences. There's no reason to get high and mighty and arrogant about your views of ice cream when it's all relative, when it is all a matter of personal taste and preference. So, applying that to morality, if you say, yeah, morality is also a matter of personal taste and preference, in particular, the preferences of the culture, then how could you, as a member of a culture, get all high and mighty and think your culture is right and other cultures are wrong? You should be open-minded. You should be humble toward other cultures. Again, this is a bad argument for cultural relativism. First of all, there is this implicit objective truth that the cultural relativist is appealing to. So this is B1, problem 1. To make this argument is to claim that no one, regardless of how they think or feel, ought to be dogmatic and narrow-minded. The argument seems to assume that we can all pretty much agree dogmatism is a terrible thing. But that sounds like a universal moral truth. So again, the cultural relativist is appealing to a universal moral truth to argue against universal moral truths. Problem 2, just as with tolerance and intolerance, it could be that on the cultural relativist view, arrogance is a virtue. How? Well, remember, according to the cultural relativist, an act is right when the majority of the culture approves of it, which means anything could be right as long as the majority of the culture approves of it, which means arrogance could be right, could be morally obligatory, could be a virtue if the majority of your culture approves of it. And not only that, it's not that if you're an objectivist, you have every reason to be arrogant, and that if you're a cultural relativist, you have every reason to be humble. Because as a cultural relativist, you don't think there's a universal moral truth that applies to all cultures. In fact, it goes the other way around. If you're an objectivist, if you believe there is a uniquely correct answer to moral questions, like the abortion issue or the gun control issue, you have every reason to be open-minded and humble. Why? Because you think that since there's a correct answer, there's the possibility that you might be mistaken. And if there's the possibility that you might be mistaken, it would make sense to listen to what other people have to say to make sure that you're tracking the truth, to improve your arguments, to improve your understanding, to get better reasons for believing what you do. So on the outline, only if there is a uniquely correct answer to moral questions does it make sense to be humble, listen to others, or be willing to suspend judgment on whether you are correct. So that virtue that cultural relativists say they promote more than anyone else is a virtue that objectivism promotes more than any other view. Think about it this way. If you're taking a math exam and your math professor gave you two options, either you could take the exam individually or as a group, which one would you choose? I bet most of you would choose to take the math exam as a group test. Why? Because you think when it comes to the math questions, there's a uniquely correct answer to each question. And because there's a correct answer, you want to have as much information as possible to make sure you're getting the right answer. You would want to listen to others because you think there's an objectively true answer to the math questions. And the same thing goes for morality. It's if you're an objectivist and you believe there are moral absolutes, that you have reasons to listen to others, to see what they have to say, to see what their reasons are, to consistently test whether you are tracking the truth. Not only that, if cultural relativism is true, you as a member of a culture have every reason to be arrogant because the culture is infallible. You have every reason to think my culture gets it right all the time because the culture is the standard of what's right or wrong. That's strange. The view would seem to suggest that you should be open to other points of view, when in fact, cultural relativism implies your culture gets it right all the time. Cultural relativists would say, if you're an objectivist, if you believe there are moral absolutes, for one, how dare you think that there's something immoral in believing that? And two, who are you to say what's right or wrong for others? Who are you to say what's right or wrong for another culture? This argument is a tough one to get your mind around. I'm usually kind of shocked when people say it because it seems to come out of nowhere. That is not quite relevant to what you're talking about with that person. When you say to someone, as a cultural relativist, who are you to say what's right or wrong? You are once again appealing to an objective moral truth. That you are wrong for judging others, or that person is wrong for judging others, for imposing their moral standards on others. You're saying they are wrong, and objectively so, regardless of whether they're a part of a culture that approves of it, regardless of whether they approve of it. But that's to appeal to a universal moral truth. So as the authors say, if someone says to you, who are you to say? Probably the best reply is to say, who are you to say that I am not to say? Someone says, who are you to judge? The best reply is, but you're judging me for judging. Aren't you making the same mistake then? And if you think you're justified in judging me for judging, then you must think judging is okay sometimes. One reason why I don't understand the who are you to say objection to objectivism is because it just doesn't seem like the right kind of reply. I can understand someone saying that to me if I were trying to dictate or declare or make something up that wasn't already true. But when you're talking about morality, that's not what we're doing. So if I said as a professor, all my students must come to class with a cap and gown on for every class, it would make sense for the students to say, who are you to say? Who are you to say that? That's not something that you can just make up and determine. You're not the university president. You're not the dean of students. Who are you to say that? Yeah, who am I to say? I can't really just make you do that. Or if I said that all marriages from now on will be illegal, it makes sense for you to say, well, who are you to say that marriage is going to become illegal? Yeah, you're right. Who am I to say? But if I say that raping children is wrong, I'm not dictating anything. I'm simply declaring what I think is the truth of the matter, that it's objectively wrong to do that. I'm not saying it's wrong because I said it is. I'm trying to report a fact of the matter. Maybe I'm mistaken, although I doubt I am. It does seem like it's objectively wrong to rape little children. I'm not saying it's wrong from now on. I'm not saying you should believe it's wrong because I said it. I'm simply describing what I think is the truth. And so it doesn't make sense to say, well, who are you to say? Well, I'm not saying that you should believe it because I said it. Just think about it. Think about what rape involves and what it is to be a child. Shouldn't it be pretty clear that it is the sort of thing that is objectively wrong? And then another self-refuting argument for cultural relativism, although this is a much broader argument, an argument against objective truth. The idea that all truth is relative or all truth is subjective. Here's another argument against moral objectivism. All truth is subjective or relative, so there are no objective truths, which would mean there are no objective moral truths. If all truth is subjective, then definitely moral truth is subjective. But again, this argument assumes the very thing it's trying to deny. Because when someone says all truth is subjective, they're implicitly saying it is an objective truth, one that anyone should accept, that all truth is subjective. And that's obviously contradictory. The same problem if you say there is no truth, not just if you say there are no objective truths, but if you say there is no truth. It sounds like you're making a true claim. You're refuting yourself. You're saying it's true that there is no truth. So it really never makes sense to say there is no truth. Because even when you try to say it, you're committing yourself to at least one truth. And the same for saying there are no objective truths. Because what you're saying, really, is that there is at least one objective truth that anyone who is rational and right-minded will accept, that there are no objective truths. Suppose someone realizes that. Suppose the cultural relativist realizes that and says, okay, I don't want to say all truth is subjective, like it's this universal truth that applies to everyone. I'll just say it's my truth that truth is subjective. But if someone were to say that to me, if they were to say, I'm going to tell you something, it's just true for me that truth is subjective or relative, I would say, then why are you telling me? Why are you telling me? Isn't it because you think I'm wrong in my views about truth? And the reason you're telling me is because you're right and you want me to agree with you? I mean, that's why you tell people truth is relative. Because what you're saying is, I've got the truth about truth. And you need to get on board. You need to get to the truth about truth. Which is just another way of saying there's an objective truth.